All right, guys, I think we're going to get ready to get going tonight. I know it's after 6, so I just wanted to welcome everybody here tonight to our financial aid presentation. Beth is going to be doing the majority of all of the speaking tonight, so I just wanted to let you know this mic's a little low for me, but we're expected to bring back this financial aid process back into the high school as much as we can. Beth Connolly Silva is a MIFA ambassador. You know, MIFA is a wonderful resource in general that I encourage all of you to look at the website. They have a lot of webinars and various tools and about college planning and scholarships in the financial aid process as a whole. The slideshow tonight will be posted in Friday Focus this coming Friday, and also be posted in the senior Google Classroom for everyone to access as well. As for our own scholarships, I know a lot of kids and parents have asked that as well, and I have a 12th grader as well. We utilize Naviance, which the kids all have access to, which they use to apply to college, but all of our local scholarships are going to flow through Naviance. That doesn't happen right away. It happens usually around December, January, and then it really picks up in those later months going into the spring. So, and there's another thing called Monomoy's Dollars for Scholars, if you hadn't heard of it before. That is another thing that is literally where the majority of our local scholarships kind of come together as one group, and you fill out a profile through Monomoy Dollars for Scholars, and it picks up what scholarships you're available to receive locally. So that's stuff we're going to go over with all your kids and even with parents later on. I'm going to leave it up to Beth tonight to kind of talk a little bit more about, in general, about financial aid, about the resources that are there by the state and the federal government. So if you have any questions, she'll be available. If you haven't already, you'd like them to sign in?
Yeah. So if anyone doesn't already have a folder, we can get you more. If you do, and if you haven't signed in yet, either using the QR code on the letter on the front, or there's a paper form in the second page of the packet. I'd really appreciate it. The letter kind of explains more as to why we collect this data, and we're just asking you to fill it out with the student information, and I'd greatly appreciate it.
All right, I'll let you go. Thank you.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Elizabeth Connolly Sylvia. I go by Beth, and I am the director of the Educational Opportunity Center on the South Coast. We're located in New Bedford, and I've been doing that for about 20 years. In addition, I'm also a MIFA ambassador, and I've been doing that for about 15 years. So I go to area high schools throughout the fall and present on financial aid, and then throughout the spring and present on college admissions. Last night, actually, I was just at Nauset High School. And I have spent a lot of time on the Cape this year, and in a couple of weeks I'll be as far west as Seekonk. So I really do cover a pretty big catchment area. We are a not-for-profit state authority, MIFA is, established in 1982 to help families plan, save, and pay for college. That being said, MIFA has a host of opportunities for families in addition to this presentation tonight. We do presentations on admissions, as well as financial aid, as well as paying the college due. There are webinars that are pre-recorded. There are podcasts that you can follow and listen to, and there are really helpful packets of information on their website as well. So by all means, visit mifa.org, and they will provide you with a host of really great information as you navigate this process. My second hat for tonight is through the Educational Opportunity Center. It is my main job. I am the director of several grants out of Seven Hills, and the Educational Opportunity Center is one of my main grants. And we are fortunate with the Educational Opportunity Center that it services the Cape as well as all of South Coast. So since COVID happened, we used to have to only conduct in-person appointments. But since COVID, we're able to provide all of our services remotely as well as in person. So if after tonight's a presentation, you feel like you still need a little bit more hand-holding, you have questions, you have concerns, we will be available to you all year, as well as the years your sons or daughters are enrolled in college, to help navigate this process. One of the major things we do is help to complete financial aid applications, and we can do that through a Zoom or Teams appointment if you need more assistance. So rest assured, let me assure you, we can help you with that process. That is part of the reason I've asked you to register your student information tonight, because you, by doing that, have the opportunity to take advantage of our free services throughout any portion of this year or beyond. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the financial aid landscape and what is happening this year. How many of you are aware that FAFSA, which is the main vehicle for financial aid, was a little hairy last year, right? Yeah, we all heard about it. This year, it's still a little bit unknown as to what's going to happen. Typically, in past years, the FAFSA has always opened up on October 1st. But because of the revamping of FAFSA, or to quote the federal government, FAFSA simplification, which really wasn't simplified for a lot of us, there's been a delay again this year in opening up the FAFSA application. So the FAFSA application is set to open sometime in December. They're promising us December 1st. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes closer to January 1st. Now, when it does open up, I'm sure many of you are aware last year there were many glitches with the actual system, even when it was up and running, and it would crash. My sense is some of that's probably going to happen again if you try to go on immediately, because everybody's going to be trying to get on at the same time. If you find it imperative to get on quickly, my best suggestion is to go in at odd hours, right? Don't go in at 5 p.m. at night or 10 a.m. in the morning, right? So you might want to try midnight or 1 a.m., all right? You want to try some off times when the traffic on the site will be slower so that the site can handle the action on it. All right, so that's just a word of advice. You do not need to get on it immediately. You just need to make sure you focus on the earliest deadline for whatever schools your child is applying to. So if you have a deadline as early as January 15th, you want to make sure you get on that before January 15th. Likewise, if it's March 1st is your earliest deadline, you have plenty of time to get this application completed. No, can you go back? Yeah? No, so you can submit, and we're going to go over some of this, but you can submit to 20 schools at once. Okay, so it is an application that goes to multiple schools, and you can go in and make corrections to it. You can add schools after the first time that you submit it. Okay, so cost is critical, right? College has gotten more expensive than ever before. There are schools, it's upwards of $90,000 now for a year of school. That being said, When it has a sticker price of $90,000, it's rarely what any family pays. So my best advice when you start to navigate this process is to have very clear and frank conversations with your kids about what is affordable for your particular family. But do not get fixated on the price tag of a school. There are many situations where the most expensive school can be the least expensive school for a particular family for a host of different reasons. So the best plan is to have a well-balanced and well-curated list. Just like you do this for the college admissions process, you have those easy to get into schools, those mid schools, and those reach schools. You want to have the same philosophy when it comes to the financial aid system. You want to look at schools that are affordable, that are super affordable, and that might be a reach, because it does not mean because a school is super expensive, it does not guarantee that it's going to be super expensive for you. Every year I work with families who the most expensive school has been the least expensive school for their particular situation. Mass state aid has expanded. Even UMass Amherst, I saw the best financial aid packages coming out of UMass Amherst this past year that I have seen in 20 years. So even UMass Amherst is providing more aid. Now, UMass Amherst is not super generous when it comes to their merit aid or their aid for achievement, but they have increased their need-based aid for middle-income families. Now, other state schools have increased their need-based aid along with their merit-based aid in the public sector in Massachusetts. Bridgewater State is one particular. If you have a weighted GPA of a 4.5, they provide a full tuition and fees scholarship. So what that translates to is an A average in honors classes. Okay? So they will provide a tuition and fees full scholarship. That's valued at about $11,000. Okay? What is financial aid? Financial aid, simply put, is money a student receives to help pay for college. And there are three main sources of financial aid. One, and the primary one, the one we want to see on all our financial aid award letters, is grants and scholarships. That is the free money that we never have to pay back. So we want to see that in our students' financial aid award packages. But that is not the only aid that is provided. Loans are a necessary piece for a lot of students, as well as work study. Now, here's the thing with work study. Work study is a job. It is a job you have to research, apply for, interview for, and most importantly, you need to show up for it. If a student doesn't go to their work study job, they don't get paid, and they don't receive that aid. Now, work study does not come off the bill, because there's no guarantee when it is awarded that a student is actually going to show up for that job weekly, right? And so the student has to earn that money as any other job in a paycheck that they'll receive every other week, okay? So that's how work study works. It helps students pay miscellaneous expenses that incur while they're enrolled in a semester. Typically, between $1,500 and $2,000 is an average amount of work study that can be awarded. Okay, next. The direct federal loan program. So this is the loans you want to take if loans are a necessary piece of the financial aid puzzle. There isn't a better loan product out there than the direct federal loan program. This loan is a guaranteed student loan. There's no credit check, okay? Student doesn't have to have a job. The only requirement is the student is enrolled in college. It's the student's loan. It has nothing to do with the parent. The interest rate is at about 6.5% for this year. It resets in May for every year. So you may have different interest rates for different years of this loan, but the loan is fixed for the 10 years of repayment. So I have 3 kids who have already graduated from college. One as late as 2011 was her high school graduation, one more recently, 2020. Interest rates were very different in those periods. My oldest has a loan rate on one of her loans at 7.5%. My COVID graduate has one that's 1.9%. Okay, because when the interest rates dropped that year. He started college in 2020, okay? So the loan rates vary based on the interest rates that are happening. My sense is for next year, they'll probably be lower than the 6.5 that they are this year. With these loans, there are multiple repayment options, many of them tied to income, as well as opportunities for public student loan forgiveness. So if a student works in the nonprofit sector, in government, they are eligible to potentially have some of their loan forgiven after repayment of 10 years. Any questions about the Stafford loans? Okay. $5,500 is typically what a student will receive freshman year, graduating to $7,500 junior and senior year. Okay? Next.
I have a question.
Yep.
Did you mention that it's subsidized versus unsubsidized?
I didn't. So thank you for that. So the subsidized loan is a loan that provides the interest to be paid for by the federal government the whole time the student is enrolled in college. And it is income-based. So not all students will receive a subsidized loan, or you may receive a subsidized loan at a more expensive school and not receive it at a less expensive school. It is going to be based on the family need. The unsubsidized loan is like every other loan. The interest accumulates as the loan is dispersed. Now, there are no prepayment penalties with these loans, so you can go in and make payments on the interest that has accumulated. But with the unsubsidized loans, the interest does occur. Okay? Questions? Awesome. Oh, go back one, sorry. So merit-based aid. Merit-based aid is what it sounds like. It is aid provided to a student based on the student's worthiness and merit. So a student who has strong academics or strong athletic ability or artistic ability will potentially be awarded merit aid in recognition of those skills and abilities. Most merit aid is actually in the form of academic aid. More likely than not, a student is going to receive aid for their academics over their artistic or athletic prowess, okay? The merit aid is not available everywhere, though. Okay, there are schools that provide a lot of merit aid, you know, places like Roger Williams University, Stonehill College, Providence College, schools like Bridgewater and Westfield State, UMass Dartmouth. Schools like BC, Harvard, Notre Dame, they provide very little, if any, merit aid. How would Harvard ever figure out who they could provide merit to, right? The merit aid is most likely to be provided to students who are beyond the typical student enrolled in that college or university. Okay? So a student who is more of a standout. So my oldest daughter, who I mentioned earlier, she graduated from high school in 2011, and she was accepted to Boston College and the College of the Holy Cross. She didn't go to either because she got a full tuition merit scholarship at Stonehill College. Okay? So she was beyond their typical student, so she got a lot of merit aid at Stonehill. Okay? So that's an example of how merit aid works. My son got merit aid at Springfield College. He got about $28,000. It was a good chunk of tuition, but not the full amount. Okay? So depending on the academic ability of a student, that will determine the amount of merit aid relative to the other students enrolled or applying to that particular college or university. Merit aid usually has renewability requirements. Sometimes it could be a GPA. Again, the more aid you're being provided, probably a stronger GPA requirement is going to be required, right? So if you're getting a full tuition scholarship, you could have a requirement of a 3.3 or a 3.5 grade point average. If it's a lower amount of merit aid, it could be a lower grade point requirement. Same thing with sports. In order to keep that athletic aid, you need to be able to keep performing. If you get injured and you can't perform at that level anymore, you could very likely lose your merit aid. Does that make sense to folks? Need-based aid. It is based on a family's eligibility, their ability to pay for a year of school. It is using a standardized formula that is used across for every family. They are not taking into account things like your mortgage, your cars, your insurance payments. Okay? They're using a very basic standard of living allowance. And then any discretionary money beyond your basic allowance is available in their eyes to help pay for school. In the eyes of the institutions as well as the federal government, the family has the primary responsibility to pay for college. Only when a family's resources are not sufficient enough does need-based aid become a factor in providing assistance to a family. In order to keep your need-based aid, you must maintain what we call satisfactory academic progress. What that means in simple terms is you need to pass your classes. You can't be a freshman for 5 semesters, okay? So you need to make progress towards a degree. Need-based aid will also include grants, loans, as well as work study. Scholarships are typically considered merit-based aid. That's the differentiation between the two. Your merit aid will typically show up in the award letter that you were accepted to the college. So in your admissions acceptance letter, you will typically see the amount of merit aid, if a school provides it, given to you at that moment. None of the financial aid will be included at that time. Then you'll get additional information that includes that merit amount, if applicable, along with any need-based aid. And that will come in the form of a financial aid award letter. And it will include both merit and need-based aid if you're eligible. All right? Next. Timelines. Timelines and deadlines are critical. There are deadlines for admissions. There are also deadlines for financial aid. You need to pay attention to them and make sure that the applications are filled out in time to meet the deadlines. Different application types have different deadlines. For instance, if you apply early action to UMass Amherst for November 1st, you have a FAFSA financial aid deadline of March 1st. Regardless of when you apply to UMass, you will have the same financial aid deadline of March 1st, and the only form they use is FAFSA. The same thing for Bridgewater or Westfield. All the four-year public colleges in Massachusetts use the March 1st deadline. The community colleges in Massachusetts use a May 1st deadline. Now, when it comes to deadlines at the private four-year schools, it's a quagmire, quite frankly. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some of this so you just understand the nuances of it. There are multiple types of college applications. There's early action, early decision, regular decision, rolling admissions, open admissions. At private schools, the type of admissions application you use is tied to a deadline for financial aid often. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So with some private schools, you may have a deadline for admission of November 15th. You could have a FAFSA deadline this year of January 15th, of February 1st, February 15th. You could have another school that you are also have a deadline for admissions of November 15th and have a late FAFSA deadline sometime in the winter. But that might be a school that uses an additional type of financial aid form called the CSS profile that we're going to discuss in a moment. That deadline could be as early as the admissions deadline. Okay? So you'll have two different types of forms to fill out, one in the winter, one in the fall. So you have to pay attention not only to the type of admissions application being submitted, you have to pay attention to what types of financial aid applications that the college is requesting, and the corresponding deadlines attached to each of them. If a school has a regular decision deadline, say of January 15th, they're not going to have a financial aid deadline prior to that date, though. Okay? The fall deadlines are most critical for early action or early decision. And you could have a FAFSA as well as a CSS profile. MIFA has a really useful tool that manages this online, and you write in the school, the types of admissions applications being used, the deadlines, and the types of financial aid applications and the deadlines. It's a very helpful tool to help organize this process. Any questions? Okay, next. I've used this word quite a bit already. This is really the workhorse for federal aid, state aid, as well as many colleges' institutional aid. It is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. It is used at virtually every college and university, It is how many, many schools disperse all of their need-based aid. It is not a one-time form. It is a form you do every year the student is enrolled in college, okay? There are multiple people who can be attached to needing to complete this FAFSA, and I'm going to go over that in a moment. You're going to use the 2023 income information for your family to complete the 25-26 FAFSA for high school seniors this year. Anyone graduating in 2025, that's what they'll be using to complete their FAFSA. Okay? So who completes the FAFSA? Anyone who has to complete the FAFSA, we call a contributor. And the major contributors are the student and parent or parents. And I'm going to dive a little bit more into that now. So when you start a FAFSA application, my best advice is to start it with the student. Now, you guys know your kids best. For me, my oldest, I probably could have sent on her own to do her FAFSA. My son, if I had sent him to do his FAFSA, he would have never done it, right? So my best advice, though, is to get them involved in the process, sit down with your sons and daughters, and have them start their portion of the FAFSA. After their portion is done, then you can start your portion as a parent contributor. So who are the parent contributors? Parent contributors are a married set of parents who live with the student. If you file a joint tax return, only one of you needs to fill out and complete the FAFSA. It will link your income tax information from the creation of your FSA ID, your username and password. We're going to talk about that the next slide, okay? But one parent needs to put the information into FAFSA. You're going to explain who the other parent is, but that parent is not going to need to have a FAFSA ID. Okay, they're not going to have the username and password that we call an FSA ID. Now, if a family is divorced, the child who receives more than half of their support from is the parent who is on the FAFSA application. So I always say the parent who provides 50.1% more support. Typically, that's going to be a custodial parent in most circumstances. But it's the parent who provides the most support. It is not necessarily the parent that makes the most, okay? If that parent who provides the most support is also remarried, the spouse is also considered a parent for the purposes of FAFSA. If they file a joint tax return, only one parent needs to complete the FAFSA. It will bring in their combined income into FAFSA. If a parent is a single parent, one parent completes the FAFSA, that parent who provides the most support. If parents live together unmarried, or if they're married and file separate tax filings, then both parents need to have an FSA ID. Both parents will do separate sections of the FAFSA to complete the full FAFSA application. All sections of the FAFSA meet up. The final person to enter information into FAFSA is the person who can hit submit. Any questions about?
So just to clarify,
Okay, every contributor has one. We're gonna go to the next slide now. So the FSA ID, it's how you get the FAFSA completed. You cannot do a FAFSA application without FSA IDs. It is a username and password. It is attached to your unique Social Security number. You also have to have a valid email. I recommend including your cell phone number when you do your FSA ID as well. It's a really easy way to retrieve it if you forget passwords and that sort of thing. The username is a username you create. It also can be your email address or your cell phone number, as long as those two things are verified. So how I do my FSA ID is I type in my cell phone number, I throw in my password, that opens up my account. As a parent contributor, I have an account on my Social Security number. Each of my kids has their own FAFSA account. Students have to create their FAFSA. They have a section. They use their FSA ID and password to enter their information into the FAFSA application. The parent does the same thing. Okay? The last person who puts information in is the one who hits submit. If you don't hit submit, it doesn't go anywhere. It goes to multiple schools all at the same time. You can put up to 20 schools into your FAFSA application at any one sitting. You can go into FAFSA multiple times and make corrections as well. Yep.
Is there a recommendation as to who should be the last person?
Yeah, like I said, you should start it with the student. And then whatever parent, if you have one parent that needs to complete it, then it's just the one parent would be the last completer, right? If you have multiple parents who need to, because that's the guidelines that you fall under, that would be your choice, okay?
And if you file jointly, does it matter which parent?
No, it doesn't. Nope. Yes.
Sorry, I'm still confused. So if each child has their own ID, but you want us to sit, you're recommending we sit down with our students who started, but we each have our own ID, I'm using it.
They're a separate application, so it's one application with separate lines in it, okay? So you do one section, and then that section's done. And then the student invites the parent to do their section, and the parent completes their information as well. The two sides join up together, you hit submit, and it goes off to the federal government and then to the schools. So if you have twins, you have to do it for each kid. It's the student's financial aid application. So every student who is enrolling in college and looking for federal or state aid needs to complete the FAFSA form. The FAFSA is initially completed using student information, and then when the student section is done, the parent is invited to complete their section. You log in with your unique information. It links up to the student portion that's already in queue. It brings those two sections together. After you submit all of your information, you're able to submit it. It's a smart application, so it walks you through each of the sections that are relevant to you in your particular situation. Does that make sense? Sort of? So again, if any family doesn't have social security numbers, if parents don't have social security numbers, there is a mechanism for that as well. That's been a little glitchy too this year, okay? If you're still unclear as to how to do it, that's what my organization can help you with. And we literally do these applications regularly for families who struggle with it and walk you through getting that completed. Yes?
Just a clarifying question. Once your student logs in using their username and password, and then it's sent to you, and you do your username and password, and you submit it, and it's combined, when you have to make changes to that,
You log in as the student. It is the student's financial aid application.
you use their username and password going forward after.
If you need to make right, then you may need to sign it as well, depending what those corrections are. And if you need to make corrections to your section, you're going to have to go back into yours, but through the students, because it's their financial aid application. Okay? Parents are contributors, but the student is the applicant for financial aid. Okay? Yes?
Sorry, just a quick refresher, so you are endorsed, you spend most of the time with me, I know we want to fill out form for, Mr. Madden's second one, or?
No. No. So for FAFSA, if you are the parent who provides more than 50% of her support, and you are divorced, you are the only parent included on FAFSA. Okay? And you're not remarried. You are remarried. So your spouse's information will also be included on FAFSA. Okay? Even if you file separate tax returns, your spouse's information would be included as well. Okay? Any other questions? All right. The CSS profile. So I already mentioned this a little bit. So this application I consider to be the FAFSA on steroids, okay? So it is used at the majority of selective or highly selective colleges and universities. Places like Harvard and Yale, Georgetown, Notre Dame, BC, BU, Tufts, to name a few. PC actually uses it as well. They use it to determine how they're going to provide students with their institutional money. If you are applying to a school that uses the CSS profile, you need to complete it. The FAFSA application, those schools will only be used for mass state aid or federal aid. The way they will provide their institutional money is through this application. You can go to cssprofile.org to get a list of the schools that use the profile. Okay? The profile is not free. There is a cost associated with it. It is $25 for the first school, $16 for additional schools. It does have a fee waiver component for income-eligible families, typically a family who earns under $100,000 a year. Unlike the FAFSA, that doesn't ask for information from the parent in a divorce situation that provides the less support, with the CSS profile, the non-custodial parent will be asked to complete a section of this form at many schools. Not all schools do, but the vast majority of schools that utilize the CSS profile will ask for the non-custodial parent information as well. Okay? And again, like I had mentioned, deadlines for this particular form could be as early as November 1st this year, or as late as March 1st. It ranges school to school in application type to application type. So depending what type of college admissions application is being utilized, it can be a very different deadline for financial aid as well. Okay? Questions about the CSS profile? Okay. The FAFSA puts the information in through the IRS electronically. It does an automatic upload of your income tax information. There's a few other pieces of information it will ask that has to be added by you manually. With the CSS profile, the entire application is manual. You have to plug in all of the information yourself. There is no upload capability. Okay, so you have to get your tax returns out and put all of the information in manually. If you own a business, if you have lots of assets, it can be a very cumbersome application. All right? Okay, next. So we just went over a lot of information. It is a little overwhelming, to say the least, for a lot of folks, okay? I will be here to answer questions after tonight's presentation is over. I'll also open it up to questions at the end. But rest assured that myself and my staff will be able to assist you. We answer questions through email. You can call us. We can schedule Zoom or Teams appointments to help navigate this process with you. You are not alone in this, okay? So let's talk a little bit now about how financial aid decisions are made, okay? So the cost of attendance is a term we use that is about the amount that a school costs for a given year, but not just those billable costs, not just the tuition and fees and the room and board, but also the books, transportation, and personal allowances. That number at some schools now can be upwards of $90,000. And then at some schools, it can be in the $10,000 range, right? Like 4 Cs, okay? So there is a range of cost of attendance. Now, the cost of attendance impacts how much aid you'd be eligible for. Because you may be eligible for no aid at 4 Cs, but at Harvard, you could be eligible for significant financial aid because those cost of attendance figures are very different. Next, there's also a term, student aid index. The student aid index is not a dollar figure you're responsible to pay, but it is a figure that represents a category of need that your family will be put in based on the standardized formula that was used by either FAFSA or, in some cases, the CSS profile. So they take all of that information that is collected through those applications to determine how much a family can afford for a given year of school. The student aid index is not what you will pay. Remember that. It just puts you into a category of need. The student aid index can be as low as negative 1,500, which is a family with the most significant need. Then a student aid index can be upwards of $100,000 if a family has that kind of income and assets, okay? It can range in any way, shape, or form. So there are big gaps between the lowest end and the highest end. When we look at the student aid index, remember, the family has the primary responsibility to pay for a year of school. So the student aid index is going to be looked at as the first place where families need to provide their own support to their student. So how does this formula work? We take the cost of attendance, we subtract the student aid index because families have the primary responsibility to pay for a year of school. Only when a family's resources are not sufficient enough to do so does the federal or institutional aid or the state aid kick in. That becomes the financial aid eligibility. Next slide. Yep.
How does, like 529 plans, like, count
It's an asset.
things, or so kind of make, it's kind of negative?
But this is much more of an income-driven formula than asset, right? So if you have 529 plans, it's only to your advantage, right? Because if your income is decent, you're going to be assessed on that income, okay? Much more heavily than on assets. Assets really don't play a huge role unless they're really huge assets. And if you have 529 plans, you would only include the information relative to the student who you're applying for aid. So the other 529 plans would not be included in the calculations. Okay? So net price calculators, we're going to go back to in a moment. Can you go back up one more slide for me? Yep, and next. No, go forward, sorry, and next. So offer letters can vary significantly. In this example, there are 3 different schools that have provided their awards to a student with a cost of attendance that's equal across the board at $45,000. This particular family has an expected contribution or a student aid index of $5,000. College A has provided over $32,000 in free money. Remember we said at the beginning, that's what we really want to see on these financial aid awards? Well, this college did it. They provided $32,000. College C, on the other end, only provided 17 and change. They all provided work study and the student loans. There was no unmet need coming out of College A. Out of College C, there was $15,000 in unmet need, along with $2,000 in work study and the $5,000 student aid index. So for a family who, in a perfect world, would be responsible for $5,000 for a year of school, they're responsible for $19,000. Plus a loan, okay? Now, if you go back to College A, that one, all the need has been met. Now, you're still looking at the $5,000 and the $2,000, right? Because that's not coming off the bill, but that is a much better financial aid package. If it were my child, they would be going to College A. And in fact, my middle daughter, who did not want to follow in her sister's footsteps, but I encouraged her to apply to Stonehill, like her sister did, because they like families and this whole thing. So, to cut to the chase, she sent me a text message one afternoon that said, "Oh, I guess I know where I'm going." Because they had provided her with a financial aid package that was really strong. It was about a 75% tuition scholarship. So when she got that email, she knew, because of the conversations we had been having all along, that that was going to be her best choice, because it was what we were willing to do financially. So I really encourage you to have those conversations early and often. In my experience, both as a parent and as a financial aid professional all of these years, what we think as parents and what our kids are thinking are very different. They're not understanding what $30,000, $40,000, $60,000 a year for school means over the course of 4 years, and how they can't even get lifted out of that when they graduate. I meet with students all the time that have tremendous debt, and they can't move out of their parents' home. They can't even purchase a car and get a loan without a co-signer of their parent, because their income to debt ratio is too high. By all means, have very open and honest conversations about what 4 or 5 years of the college debt means, not just 1 year. Typically, what is recommended is never more than the first year starting salary. That would be the absolute max a student should be looking at in outstanding debt. And I would venture to say even lower than that if a student is required to go to graduate school, say a teacher, right, who has to go to graduate school, you know, within 5 years of undergrad. Okay, so really pay attention to that. Nursing or engineering, you may be able to increase that indebtedness a little bit because of the salary structure and not needing necessarily to go on to higher education, or having employers who will really help to support higher education. But it's really critical for our kids to have the full picture. Because, yeah, going to your dream school is wonderful, only if it doesn't sacrifice your future. Next. Here is an award letter that is misleading. So these are 3 different offer examples. There's something very glaring on this one, though. Parent loans, right? A parent loan may be a necessary evil for your family. At times it was for mine, okay? But it is not financial aid. It is not guaranteed. You have to have the income to cover it. You have to have the income to debt ratio. You have to have the credit score. Many parents are denied parent loans. And in fact, you may be awarded a parent loan freshman year, but by junior year, you don't have the income to debt ratio to support it anymore. And of course, remember, for most of us, what we do for one child, we need to think about doing for multiple kids, right? So if you have more than one student that will be entering college, it is another consideration to make. when my oldest was admitted to BC and Holy Cross, I still had a child in daycare. So I am with you guys. I have a 15-year-old still, so I am going to be going through this one more time in the very near future. But knowing I had 4 kids, it really did impact the decisions my husband and I made as a family with our daughters, because we had to do for one what we had to do for the others. And so that really adds up quickly. And so you just want to be very cognizant of the fact of where you stand and how much you can absorb in 1 year. Because to put that debt on our kids really does set them at a disservice. And they cannot get loans beyond the federal loans that I showed you at the beginning of tonight without a cosigner. So that would be mom, dad, or some family member willing to co-sign those loans. They cannot get them beyond that $5,500 for freshman year without someone else supporting that. Okay? Any questions at this point? Okay, next. So paying for college. Yep. Here's some good news, okay? And I mentioned this at the beginning of tonight, but the state of Massachusetts has really expanded its aid programs. So they have an expansion of both aid for the 4-year colleges, but significantly have come to the table with free community college for pretty much everybody, right? And so it can be a really great way to save some significant money. There are lots of different articulation agreements with private and public colleges. After you complete your first 2 years and get all of your general eds completed, you can transfer to an array of 4-year colleges with scholarships as well that can really reduce the cost of a 4-year degree. I know that it's not ideal for everybody, but it is an option and something I encourage families to at least explore as a opportunity to reduce overall costs. There is a decent expansion as well of aid for middle-income families at the 4-year colleges as well. Like I said, I've seen better financial aid packages coming out of UMass Amherst in the past year than I had ever seen in nearly 20 years. Just remember that you want to have your eggs in enough baskets so that there are options. There are schools that will provide significant merit aid as well as financial aid. And never focus on the price tags of a given school. Just have very frank conversations as to what is an affordable amount of money for your family for a year of college, knowing that you're doing the math that what that means over 4 years. Colleges utilize payment plans. You can put lump sums down as well. Okay? There are many ways to meet the full costs without having to take out lots of loans. I also can't stress enough outside scholarships. They can really bridge the gap. My own kids, I required them, so if my husband and I were going to make this big investment, I required them to fill out 25 scholarship applications. They wanted to kill me. But that was my deal with them. You know, if we're going to help support you and give you this amount of money every year, you need to do your work. And so they did it, and their awards ranged from $6,000 to $14,000 going into freshman year. And they also got additional scholarships when they were enrolled in college. Every college has endowed scholarships beyond their traditional financial aid or merit aid scholarships that different donors provide for different reasons. One of my daughters got $5,000 to study abroad. She did an application and she got additional money to go to Ireland for a semester. A couple of my kids had scholarships that went multiple years that they had applied for. Every little bit helps. 500 here, 1,000 there can really make a difference and really help make this more affordable. So I highly, highly, highly recommend encouraging your kids to do scholarships. And anyone who works in a high school will tell you, kids hate doing them. Because a lot of times they have essays attached to them, and they're burnt out after the college admission season. They do not want to complete these scholarship applications. So oftentimes, there's not a lot of competition for them as well. So really, really encourage your kids to work on the scholarships. It can really make a huge difference. Next. So some free resources. FAFSA Day, at FAFSAday.org, you can find locations throughout the Commonwealth. They'll be happening from January probably through April. And the next slide. Got a delay. So my information again, so we are with the Educational Opportunity Center. I am in New Bedford. The email address you see up on the screen is my administrative assistant who kind of fields my messages for me because my inbox can get a little overwhelmed. There are lots of information she can provide. If she doesn't know the answer, she shoots it to me or one of my assistant directors who will be able to answer questions. If you wanted to schedule an appointment, whether it's remote or even in person, you can certainly reach out to her by telephone. It is the most direct way to get an appointment scheduled. We are not currently scheduling FAFSA appointments until the FAFSA actually opens up. Okay? It's going to be all over the media. You're going to hear about it. But once we have a definite date that it is opening up, we will start to schedule appointments as well. We are scheduling appointments right now for the CSS profile. Okay? Next. This is in your packet. Okay? Just things to think about to make sure you're on track through senior year. And next. All right. So again, you can reach out to MIFA. If you're doing the FAFSA in the middle of the night and you have a question, I'm not always at work. But you can reach out to MIFA at their 800 number, and they have a call system available. The number on top is our number at EOC, and the college planning at MIFA.org can also respond to you, as well as my administrative assistant, Dee Arabata, at 7hills.org. I know this was a ton of information, but again, you can follow up and get more questions answered. Shoot me an email. You can leave us a phone call and we will a phone message and we will return your phone calls as well. I really ask you to please complete those forms. If you did a paper one, you can hand them to me or simply leave them in the back with the staff that is here tonight. I will take questions at this point. Yep.
If you apply for Mass Aid, are you able to get Mass Aid if your son or daughter's going out of state?
Yes. So Mass Aid can be available at certain schools, but not the expansion of Mass Aid, okay? But Mass Aid, typical Mass Aid is for lower income families, typically, okay? So the expansion of Mass Aid has gone into middle income families, but that's only for our public four-year universities, okay? Other questions? Yes.
Should the CSS profile be filled out as the student or as the parent?
It's always the student's financial aid application, yes. And so with the CSS profile, because remember I said it's from our friends at the College Board, they use their College Board account if they already have one. Okay, so they use their College Board login to do their financial aid application. There will be student information included, then parent information, and then if the non-custodial parent is a piece of it, it is a separate application that meets up. Yes?
Narrative 2024, if you're using 2023 financials.
So you're going to have to plug everything in manually because your tax return doesn't match up with your marital status. Yay! If you need help, though, by all means, reach out. You're welcome. Yes?
There's a school that my daughter is interested in, that if she really wants to go there and does early decision, that colleges just stated that they will provide for those students that want early decision, that they will need 100% of demonstrated need.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there might still be money that we might have to come up with if the SAI is showing that. But otherwise, everything else might be needed for student loans or study and such. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
Yeah, but demonstrated need is the key, right? So Boston College, for instance, is a school that meets demonstrated need. I couldn't send my daughter there. They met my demonstrated need, but it wasn't the need I felt I demonstrated. Okay? So just beware, right? Demonstrated need can work for many families. That's kind of what I said earlier where, you know, it can be a $90,000 a year school. It meets full need and it's the cheapest option for your family, or it may not be the cheapest option. Okay? Yes.
Similar situation, if a student's applying early decision, they complete the CSF profile, how does then financial aid, the FAFSA, come into play? Because they're going to give you your package before the FAFSA.
Right. So the CSS profile is able to determine federal aid. It just can't award federal aid. Does that make sense? So all of the information you put into a CSS profile is sufficient for the college to determine what type of federal or state aid you may be eligible for. They can't award that federal aid without using the FAFSA, though. So once the FAFSA opens up, you'll need to do that FAFSA, but they can give you the estimated aid package. And then with early decision, know that if the aid isn't sufficient, you can back out. Okay? And it doesn't mean that, oh, they met demonstrated need, so the aid is sufficient, I can't back out. Yes, you can. They can't force you to pay for any particular school, right? So it's what you believe you need. Right? So if you get that aid package and you just really, the math doesn't work, you can back out. Okay? Yes?
Sorry again, the CSS profile is what's throwing me. So, I don't know if I'm...
That throws a lot of people.
If I'm understanding it correctly, it sounds like the CSS profile is predominantly for private schools?
Yes.
Okay, so does then, when you fill that out, does that affect your merit package? Or your
No.
individual package from the school?
No, no. So if you are applying to a school that you get merit aid from, and it also requires a CSS profile, potentially you may not get any need-based aid because the merit aid might be sufficient, right? Or it could be a profile school that doesn't provide any merit aid, just need-based aid. And so you need to complete that CSS profile to get that reduction in cost. But merit aid is separate and apart. And merit aid is not dependent upon your need. You're eligible for it based on the student's abilities. That's how the merit aid is determined. It has nothing to do with need. Does that make sense? Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, I thank you all for coming this evening. I hope you found this informative. I know it was a ton of information. Please feel free to reach out to myself or my staff with any additional questions or concerns, and have a great evening.